Gleaming golden buggies and silver sublight speed jets come together to form one of the most powerful Pendulum decks ever made on today's episode. Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. Today, it's time to fulfill a request from this month's Quasar Commander, and they've picked a topic that ties in with our most recent lore video, which you can find right here. Several archetypes make up the Draco Slayer storyline, not least of which being Draco Slayers. But one of the most impactful, especially when it came to pendulums, was Metalfoes. Premiering in the August 2016 core set, The Dark Illusion, these fast, fierce, and fiery warriors began the third year that pendulums had been implemented, and they were going to blow the doors off that mechanic. And considering this was after the infamous Performage pendulum format, that's saying something. So let's put these cards on the scale to see how they weigh in, see how they normally work, then see if they can gather enough spoons to outdo Mega Alakazam. It's time to pop off with Metalfoes. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and there's no better way to get there than on our dual runners. Our next stop is 40k, which means Leo and Luna Explained, where we'll be covering Ancient Fairy Dragon's companions, the Power Tool Dragons, Morphtronics, and any other cards that are more than meets the eye. We've also got our Discord, where we now have Space Boats. I also have a Twitch where you can join me for viewer duels, progression pulls, and chaos draft pulls for the foreseeable future. And don't forget about my Patreon, where you can gain access to my videos early, reach some of these milestones, as well as helping to determine which videos I make. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So, what's the deal with Metalfoes? Well, they're a series of fire attribute psychic type pendulum monsters, and they're one in a long line of themes that benefit from blowing up their own cards. However, unlike Fire Kings or Cosmos, they don't usually draw so much on triggering effects when destroyed, though there are a few. Rather, they leverage the power of Pendulum to destroy their own cards, swap them out for other powerful ones, then revive some destroyed monsters with the power of Pendulum to keep their resources flowing, especially so they can be used for fusion summons, and eventually, Link summons. Notably, their scales are also incredibly powerful, being either 1 or 8 without applying any restrictions, making them one of, if not the, most powerful generic set of scales in the game. And while this still meant you couldn't pendulum back levels 1 and 8s, the 2 through 7 lineup was still an incredible roster to pull from. A majority of them also share the same pendulum effect. Once per turn, you can target one other face-up card you control, destroy it, and if you do, set a Metalfoes spell or trap card directly from your deck. This gives you unprecedented access to this deck's many support cards, including its fusion spells. Firstly, let's go over the initial wave of main deck Metalfoes, who are all normal monsters. And to show them off, I've prepared a little ditty. I am the very model of a modern normal pendulum. I help combos by maintaining numeric equilibrium with scales small like Evil Heel and large like this comedian to summon cards from Capsule to Miss Valley Apex Avian. My flavor text is balanced by effects that are quite radical, destroying cards for others more immediately practical. Our monsters show their psychic because their vehicles are full of spoons. Spoons. Spoons full of spoons. Despite the fact that it makes one look like a bumbling buffoon. Despite the fact that it makes one look like a bumbling buffoon. Despite the fact that it makes one look like a bumbling buffoon. Despite the fact that it makes one look like a bumbling buffoon. My fusion spells are numerous and often rather boisterous, saying nothing of our links with power bordering disastrous. I help combos by maintaining numeric equilibrium. I am the very model of a modern normal pendulum. He helps combos by maintaining numeric equilibrium. He is the very model of a modern normal pendulum. Got all that? Good. From now on, all of our Metalfoes will actually be effect monsters, though the pendulum effects won't change. Rare Metalfoes Bismugear is a level 1 monster with 0 attack and defense with a scale of 8, and if this card on the field is destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can add a Metalfoes monster from your deck to your hand during the end phase of this turn. Note that the activation colon is set right after Bismugear is destroyed, and not during the end phase. This makes it an effect that activates on destruction, but doesn't come into play until later, meaning you can move Bismugear to any other zone and still get that effect, which is very useful, though you will want to make sure you keep a reminder on hand so neither you nor your opponent miss the search, because unlike an effect like Scarms, once it's in motion, it has to resolve. And thankfully, or not thankfully depending on your stance, this is a hard once per turn, so you can't blow up multiple Bismugear to get multiple searches, or find a way to get this out of your face-up extra deck and blow it up all over again to trigger the effect again. Suffice it to say, the designers learned their lessons after printing Double X Saber Dark Soul. Metalfoes Melcaster is a level 7 monster with 2000 attack and 2500 defense with a scale of 1. And if this card on the field is destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can add a face-up Metalfoes Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, except a copy of itself, but you cannot activate it, or cards with its same name, to place it in the Pendulum zones for the rest of the turn, except by a card effect. This is a pretty neat way to recycle Bismugear, since you sure as heck aren't Pendulum summoning it back without the help of a Supreme King, the Arc V one, and having another level 7 in the cast means we have even easier access to rank 7s, most importantly being Odd Eye's Absolute Dragon, which is another example of fire and ice working really well together despite their differences in relative temperatures. Metalfoes Vanisher is probably the strangest member of the cast. It's a level 9 monster with 2900 attack and 1900 defense with a scale of 1, and as a pendulum spell, if any number of monsters you control are destroyed by a battle or card effect, except during the damage step, you can add a Metalfoes card from your grave to your hand, except a copy of itself. And while it's a monster, while this card is in your hand, Vanisher can target 2 face-up cards you control, including a Metalfoes card, destroy them, and if you do, special summon this card from the hand. And if this card is special summoned by the effect of a Metalfoes card, you can target a monster your opponent controls or in their grave and banish it. So it's way too high level to be pendulum summoned, and it doesn't even follow the usual pendulum effect, so what gives? Well, this is presumably in response to the defeat of the True King of all calamities and their 3 associated True King monsters. One was Agni Mazud the Vanisher, which this card takes its level and stat line from, as well as being able to special summon themselves in a similar manner, as well as having a similar banishing effect. Now, we're no strangers to destroying our own cards, but normally we try to do that as a way to advance our combos, though being able to banish a monster ain't too shabby. And heck, that's not even necessary to do, as we actually have access to a few Metalfoes effects that can special summon Vanisher, so you don't have to worry about popping your own cards if you don't want to. Which is good, because if you keep feeding this, then your card advantage is just gonna vanish. Alright, that's all of our main deck monsters, now it's time to talk about fusions. And like the early Metalfoes, we've got a few non-effect monsters to cover first. Adamant is a level 5 monster with 2500 attack and defense, and requires any Metalfoes monster and another monster with 2500 or less attack. Crimsonite is a level 9 monster with 3000 attack and defense, requiring a Metalfoes monster and 2 monsters with 3000 or less attack. Now, these aren't super notable on their own, save for the fact that this is another option you can utilize if you're splashing in another theme. Not only can you bring in monsters you can pendulum summon with those sweet 1 to 8 scales, you can also generally use them as fusion material for these heckin' chonkers. But the best part is how well they work as super poly targets. Selecting a range of attack is probably the most generic requirement you could ever put on an extra deck monster, aside from saying you just need a monster. This means Crimsonite is basically the lava golem of fusion monsters, though it's you that gets to keep the big fiery monster, while Adamant can act as a kaiju on less developed fields. Though your results may vary on this one, as a single lone monster is probably going to have a higher attack than 2500. Despite that, these cards don't see a lot of play nowadays due to their lack of utility, and I can see why that is, but I'm confident we can see a resurgence in their usage with the right utensilization. Full Metalfoes Alcahest is a level 1 monster with 0 attack and defense, requiring a Metalfoes monster and a normal monster as material, and must be fusion summoned. Once per turn during your opponent's turn as a quick effect, you can target an effect monster on the field and equip that target to this card. This card gains defense equal to the combined original attack of the monsters equipped to it by this effect, and you can use monsters you control equipped to this card you control as material for the fusion summon of a Metalfoes fusion monster that lists them as material. So on the surface, this is basically relinquished at quick effect speed, which is ridiculously annoying to deal with. Unless your opponent has a token or a normal monster that can just run over this, the second someone fields a decently useful effect monster, Alcahest just scoops it right up and makes it so the owner can't use it, and provides a nifty defense buff. Heck, you can even scoop up your own monsters if you want to, just to keep Alcahest safe. Using the absorbed monster as fusion material is usually of secondary concern, but it's still nice to have if what you take happens to line up with the monster you want a fusion summon for. Though be careful, because a lot of monsters will have grave effects that trigger even if they're sent from the field as a spell card. But one of my favorite things is that every time I see this, I want to sound like those ad bumpers for Full Metal Alchemist. Like, watch this. Full Metalfoes Alcahest. Full Metalfoes Alcahest. Uncanny, right? Metalfoes Mithrilium is a level 6 monster with 2600 attack and 1000 defense, requiring a Metalfoes monster and a Pendulum monster as material. It can target 2 Metalfoes cards in your grave and 1 card on the field, shuffling the targets from your grave into the deck, and if you do, return the target on the field to the hand. And if this card is sent from the field to the grave, you can special summon a Metalfoes Pendulum monster from your grave or face-up extra deck. This monster combines a great stat line with removal and a little bit of utility. See, it doesn't just bounce your opponent's cards, but yours as well. So let's say you use your Metalfoes Pendulum effects to set a quick play spell card from your deck, but because of game mechanics, you can't actually use it that turn. Unlike a normal spell, quick play spells obey trap card rules once set. But if you bounce it back to your hand with Mithrilium, you can use it immediately. And if you end up using Mithrilium as material, or it just goes from the field to the grave in general, you get a Reborn. This makes Metalfoes Vanisher an exceedingly good piece of fusion material, because it'll come right back once Mithrilium leaves the field, banishing a monster. Also, I've gotta point out that Mithrilium's guns are their vehicle's handles, right down to using the brake lever as the trigger. Have I mentioned that I love Yu-Gi-Oh art? Parametalfoes Azortless is a level 7 fusion pendulum monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense with a scale of 8, requiring a Metalfoes monster and a fusion monster as material. As a pendulum spell, if any number of face-up Metalfoes cards you control are destroyed by card effect, except during the damage step, you can target a face-up card on the field and destroy it. And as a monster, if this card is special summoned from the extra deck, which generally means fusion or pendulum summoning, you can target a card your opponent controls, shuffle 2 face-up pendulum monsters from your extra deck into the deck, and if you do, destroy that card. And if this card in the monster zone is destroyed, you can place it in your pendulum zone. This is one of our coolest fusions, if not the least used. Turns out using a fusion monster as material isn't exactly the most cost efficient. And unfortunately, its removal effects aren't really what the deck needs. But should the format call for removal, Azortless makes for some fantastic repeatable destruction, especially now that pendulum summoning is a lot more restrictive, and you don't need to maintain a hugely stacked extra deck for massive pendulum summons. In fact, you could say that the emphasis on it has Azort lessened. Metalfoes Orichalc is a level 8 monster with 2800 attack and 2200 defense, requiring any 2 Metalfoes monsters as material. That's right, no dabbling in outside themes. For Orichalc, you need to be dedicated to the cause. All your Metalfoes monsters deal double piercing battle damage, which is, wow. And if this card is sent from the field to the grave, you can target a card on the field and destroy it. This is a massive damage enabler that has a bit of an insurance policy baked right in. If your opponent is on the defensive, you can severely punish them, and Orichalc can either destroy something in retaliation if your opponent blasts it, or you can use it as a link or fusion material to be a bit more proactive. So, when trying to use this card to the fullest, you'll want to stop and ask yourself a few questions. That rounds out our fusion monsters, but the extra deck isn't done yet, because we've got the next thing any good pendulum deck needs to deal with the current master rule: Link monsters. And the most infamous of them all is Heavy Metalfoes Electromite, a Link 2 monster with 1800 attack, requiring any 2 pendulum monsters as material. If this card is Link summoned, you can add any pendulum monster from your deck to your extra deck face up, effectively acting as a foolish burial for an entire subsection of monsters. And once per turn, you can target one other face up card you control, destroy it, then add a face up pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand. And if any number of cards in your pendulum zones leave the field, you draw a card. And wowee, did this card get out of hand immediately. Basically, every part of this card combos with itself. By sending a pendulum monster to your face-up extra deck, you set it up to be recovered by Electromite's second effect, and if you blow up one of your pendulum scales for that effect, that feeds into Electromite's third effect, drawing you a card. This was ridiculously powerful on release, combining with Pendulum Magicians to great effect. You could add double Iris Magician into the mix, searching out your powerful Pendulum Graph cards, extend with Black Fang Magician, get removal with Purple Poison Magician, and then using Electromite as link material after it was used to get even more powerful link monsters with better arrows. And that's without talking about any of the Endymion Pendulum cards. It was ridiculous, but despite all that, there are people who still ask for it to be unbanned to this day, citing power creep making this not as powerful. In fact, there are so many fans of Pendulum that want this card off the ban list that I think it's about time we brought back an old segment, Escape the Vault. Can Electromite escape the Forbidden Sect? No. But every classic has its cheap imitation. Heavy Metalfoes Amalgam is a Link 2 monster with 2000 attack, requiring 2 Metalfoes monsters as material. If this card is sent from the monster zone to the grave by a card effect, you can activate one of these effects. Either target a Metalfoes monster you control, equip it with this card, and it gains 1000 attack, or target a Metalfoes card you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon this card. So this allows you to handle a couple of different scenarios. One is turning Amalgam into an Axe of Despair to help you get over big things you'd have trouble getting over otherwise. The second is giving you the biggest Pendulum summon you've ever had. Since Amalgam has 2 side-pointing arrows, it's not very useful in the EMZ, but use it as fusion material or blow it up with your Pendulum Scales, revive it with its own effect, and now it's in the main monster zone, giving you 2 more zones you can Pendulum summon to. It also helps give you a repeatable monster to use as fusion material, which is also pretty useful. However, it lacks any way to set up those plays like Electromite did, so it's nowhere close to replacing the old legend, no matter how many cool fire swords you bring to the table. Alright, that's all the monsters, and now it's time for the spells and traps, and we'll be starting with another iconic card, Metalfoes Fusion, a normal spell that fusion summons a Metalfoes fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or field as material. And if this card is in your grave, you can shuffle it into your deck, then draw a card. In Archetype, this makes for a great repeatable source of extra deck access, since you can search it out with your Pendulum effects, shuffle it back into your deck, and get it back with your Pendulums again. But the effect that gives you a draw means it's seen inclusion in a number of decks that love the grave. Archetypes that discard and mill love the chance to shunt this into the grave to give you what amounts to an upstart goblin. It was especially strong in Sky Strikers, as you could use Foolish Burial Goods to load this into your grave, getting you that much closer to your bonus effects, and once you had 4 or more and didn't need to worry about reaching that threshold, you could just shuffle back Metalfoes Fusion to make up for the lost card. Basically, this card is loved by everyone, so it's hard to see how it would make any foes. Parametalfoes Fusion is a normal spell that fusion summons a Metalfoes fusion monster from your extra deck, using up to 1 monster each from your hand, field, and or face-up extra deck as fusion material. Now this is some good fusion power! Most of the material you use will end up in the grave instead of the extra deck, but as we touched on before, it's not quite as imperative that we maintain a stockpile of Pendulum monsters. So sending a few to the grave isn't bad, especially if we send them from the face-up extra deck, which doesn't have any kind of restriction on where monsters can be summoned from. And with Mithrilium, you'll easily be able to bring those monsters back, or even use them as material to activate its first effect. So while you can sink 3 material into this to make a Crimsonite, most of the time, you'll be looking for a good pair of monsters to make your Metalfoes. Full Metalfoes Fusion is a quick play spell that fusion summons a Metalfoes fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or field as material. It doesn't have any extra flavor to it, but like El Shaddoll Fusion before it, the possibilities are endless. You can fuse away a monster that's about to be destroyed so you can make a new one, or fuse it away to dodge some kind of effect negation. Or fuse it during the battle phase to get even more damage. And if you use Mithrilium or Orichalc, this is a good way to use their effects on demand as well. It might take a bit of imagination, but once you get a handle on this card, you'll be able to use it to its full Metalfoes potential. Metamorph Formation is a field spell that boosts all of your Metalfoes monsters' attack and defense by 300, and while a Metalfoes card is in your Pendulum zone, non-effect Metalfoes monsters you control are unaffected by your opponent's effects. This means that like half of our cards aren't really covered by this, which is pretty sad. But makes sense because otherwise it'd probably be hella broken. So, hey, if this is on the field, then Volflame becomes a gigantic beater that your opponent will have to find very specific answers to out, because even running it over by battle isn't even a permanent solution, since intact scales means you can just Pendulum summon it right back. But I think the worst part is, like all the field spells in this lore, it's not even name-stamped to match the archetype it's supposed to work with, so you can't even set it to the field with your Pendulum effects, just in case you wanted to utilize your normal monsters. Some formation that ended up being. Metalfoes Counter is a normal trap that you can activate when any number of your cards are destroyed by battle or card effect, and it special summons a Metalfoes monster from your deck. And during either player's turn, except the turn this card was sent to the grave, you can banish this card from your grave to add a face-up Metalfoes Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand. This is a pretty nifty all-around tool. It gets a monster on field to replace anything of yours that's destroyed, and while it can be reactive to your opponent, you can just use it when you destroy one of your own cards with your Metalfoes Pendulum effects. And if you need help resetting your scales but they're trapped in your extra deck, or you just want to have the Metalfoes in hand so you can Pendulum summon them from there without worrying about the EMZ restrictions, or to even just get Bismugear back, this card has you covered. But the one thing I like most about this is how not Arc V this is, because there's nothing more 5Ds than getting really close to your motorcycle. Like, like really close, like uncomfortably close. Metalfoes Combination is a continuous trap card, and once per turn, if a fusion monster is fusion summoned, you can target a Metalfoes fusion monster in your grave with a lower level than that fusion monster and special summon it. And if this card is sent from the field to the grave, you can add a Metalfoes monster from your deck to your hand. While not quite as much of a standout hit as our other Metalfoes support, this card would crop up anytime a theme was splashed in with Metalfoes that could destroy face-down cards. See, the downside of using your Metalfoes Pendulum effects was that it set those cards face down, meaning you couldn't pop whatever you set, like Combination. So you'd need something else to handle that for you. Some Performapal monsters were really good at this, namely Pendulum Sorcerer, but you could also just pop it with Twin Twisters if you were so inclined to turn one of its targets on yourself. And while it was used far less often, the first effect meant that you could fusion summon from your hand with no issue, because you would usually end up summoning back the monster you used as material if it was low enough level, and with Orichalc, that covered basically anything, with the only thing not under that umbrella is Vanisher, which to be fair was just recently added. So the name is quite apt, as it allows you to combine Metalfoes with a lot of different strategies. Alright, so that's all the Metalfoes cards, but what do we do with them? Well, by utilizing our unique approach to card advantage, we'll want to establish a good pendulum loop to keep our resources flowing, leveraging said resources into powerful link and fusion monsters, and maybe a few other things if we're feeling spicy, and run over our opponent with the power of value and this gun I found. So what can we play to help them out? Well, we'll want to incorporate some Pendulum staples to maximize our play sequences. While we no longer have Electromite, Beyond the Pendulum is the next best thing. It gives you another Pendulum monster to use and provides some great removal. However, you'll need to find a way to make this before you Pendulum summon so your effects don't get locked out, and a good way to do that is with Chronograph Sorcerer. Once you blow up one of your own cards, Chronograph can be summoned from the hand, along with another monster if you so choose. And if it's a Pendulum monster, you can make Beyond pretty easily. The now limited Astrograph can do something similar, though it adds from the deck to the hand instead of giving you a free summon, so you will have to eat your normal summon in that case. Then, once you've used Beyond's effects, you can pretty easily use them as a ladder up into Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians. If you run any spellcasters, Effect Veiler, Magical Abductor, and the Mythical Beasts come to mind, you can revive them from your grave using all the delicious spell counters you accumulated for having Pendulum Scales and spells in your grave to make Access Code, everyone's favorite OTK machine. Apex Avion is also a thoroughly powerful monster to Pendulum summon out, providing you with an Omni Negate, though if you want something a bit less bricky, use any two level 7 monsters to make Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon, then link it away to make Vortex for a tried and true negation body. For normal support, a lot of the usual suspects work well with us. Summoner's Art can get us Volflame, while Painful Decision can search us the rest of our normal crew, while loading one up in the grave to use with Mithrilium. Meanwhile, Unexpected Die can summon those same monsters out onto the field to help with Beyond the Pendulum shenanigans. Balbaboon is a wonderful piece of card selection that turns into incredible advantage with our deck. While this card doesn't net us any card advantage, we can use this to dig deeper into our deck while tucking away Garnets and getting more of our Metalfoes spells and traps. And with the 2 new Balbaboons you summon out, you can either pop them for more Metalfoes cards or use them as material for a ton of other things. You can make rank 3s, link 2s that require plants, darks, or generics. There's a lot we can do here. As for a silly tech pick, well, tennies. We do have quite a few non-effect monsters by virtue of them being normal, so you get a lot of mileage out of your worms. Heck, even if you do control effect monsters, you can just Pendulum summon the spirits right out. And that's all I have to say about Metalfoes. This is probably one of the raddest Pendulum archetypes to ever see print. You can play them with just about everything due to their wide scales and broadly synergistic effects, while packing a unique punch all their own. If you ever want to experience swinging into action with a deck whose combo is only 12 steps instead of 57, then you'll feel right at home. Just, don't take the deck's themes to heart, alright? No one benefits from self-destructive behavior. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Metalfoes your new best friends, or have they made too many enemies? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including Quasar Commander Harry, the Ominous Benefactor, Special Contributor Gibbles the Gibble, Nebula Navigators 3rd Dynasty, Adam Zajdel, Ashling Waltz, Avi Chali, Benjamin Meisner, Cameron Berg, Cryptic Gamer, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Meteornus, Michael Madsen, Mighty Action X, Muzuki Clark, Neo Trinity, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, RJ the Jank Monarch, Ruxeth Sarani, The Fresh Prince of Conair, The Wizard Moose, True Neutral, Tyler Cranston and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Cozy Boat 275, Jesus Garcia, KL, Kale the Dragon, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, RGS, Rem T. Bright, Shooting Star 3300, Star-Lord 777, Tyler Martin and the Legendary Raven, as well as the lovely Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you want to see another video about the lore the Metalfoes are a part of, check out this playlist where I cover the Draco Slayer storyline. And if you want to see two Yu-Gi tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenk and I's latest series Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.